He was running a restaurant, organizing meal service like he had for 8 years. When the natural disaster struck, the food distribution network and supply chain management he established were military logistics coordinator level. These skills aren't learned in culinary school. But Marcus's background was different. Some stories feed communities in ways that nourish more than hunger, carried by those who understand that logistics can be love in action. Before we explore this tale of a hidden coordinator, tell us in the comments which city you're watching from today. And if you believe these quiet organizers deserve recognition, hit that subscribe button. Marcus Washington had been managing Mama Rose's Italian kitchen in downtown Houston for 8 years. Every day at 5 a.m., he'd arrive to oversee deliveries, coordinate the kitchen staff, and ensure that everything ran smoothly for the 300 to 400 customers they served daily. The restaurant was a neighborhood institution, known for generous portions, affordable prices, and Marcus's ability to keep everything running like clockwork. Staff loved working for Marcus. He was fair, organized, and had an uncanny ability to predict exactly how much food to order, how many servers to schedule, and how to handle rush periods without chaos. He could coordinate a 12-person kitchen team during Saturday night dinner rush with the precision of a conductor leading an orchestra. Regular customers appreciated Marcus's attention to detail. He remembered their preferences, could estimate wait times accurately, and somehow always had their favorite dishes available even during busy periods. To everyone who knew him, Marcus was simply an exceptional restaurant manager who made difficult work look effortless. What none of them knew was that Marcus's organizational skills had been honed during 15 years as a U.S. Army logistics coordinator, managing supply chains in some of the world's most challenging environments. From 1995 to 2010, Staff Sergeant Marcus Washington served with the Army's Transportation Corps, specializing in combat logistics and supply chain management. His job was to ensure that troops in forward operating bases received everything they needed to survive and complete their missions: food, water, ammunition, medical supplies, equipment, and fuel. Marcus had deployed to Bosnia, Iraq, and Afghanistan, often working in austere conditions where a single mistake in logistics planning could leave soldiers without essential supplies. He coordinated convoy operations across hostile territory, managed warehouses in desert conditions, and established supply lines for bases housing thousands of personnel. His specialty was feeding the fight, ensuring that remote outposts received fresh food, clean water, and medical supplies despite challenging terrain, security threats, and limited transportation assets. Marcus could calculate exactly how much food was needed for a 500-person base for 3 months, coordinate delivery schedules across multiple supply routes, and establish backup plans for when primary logistics chains were disrupted. The work required mathematical precision, cultural awareness, and the ability to solve complex problems under extreme pressure. Marcus had to understand not just what soldiers needed, but when they needed it, how to get it to them safely, and how to maintain operations when equipment failed or routes became impossible. But the psychological toll was significant. Marcus witnessed the consequences when logistics failed: soldiers going without meals, medical supplies running out during casualties, equipment breakdowns that left units vulnerable. He carried the weight of knowing that his planning decisions directly affected the safety and morale of troops in combat zones. Marcus's most challenging assignment came during the 2007 Iraq surge, when he was responsible for coordinating food and medical supply deliveries to 12 forward operating bases in Anbar province. The routes were dangerous, the bases were growing rapidly, and demand was constantly changing based on mission requirements and casualty rates. One particular mission haunted Marcus. A convoy carrying medical supplies to a remote base was delayed by an IED attack, and when casualties came in later that day, the aid station didn't have enough blood products to treat the wounded. Several soldiers died who might have survived with better logistics planning. That incident convinced Marcus that he needed to find a way to use his skills for something other than war. When his enlistment ended in 2010, he decided not to re-enlist despite offers for promotion and advanced training. The transition to civilian life was challenging. Marcus's skills were highly specialized, but didn't translate obviously to civilian careers. Corporate logistics positions felt cold and profit-driven after years of life-or-death supply operations. Government contractor jobs reminded him too much of the military world he was trying to leave behind. Marcus ended up in restaurant work almost by accident. A friend needed help managing a struggling cafe, and Marcus volunteered to help with inventory and scheduling. He discovered that restaurant operations required many of the same skills he developed in the military: predicting demand, coordinating deliveries, managing staff workflows, and maintaining operations under pressure. The difference was profound. Instead of supporting combat operations, he was feeding families. Instead of calculating ammunition requirements, he was ensuring that children had birthday cakes and couples had anniversary dinners. The skills were the same, but the purpose felt healing rather than destructive. Marcus worked his way up through several restaurants before landing the management position at Mama Rosa's. The Italian family who owned the restaurant appreciated his operational excellence and his genuine care for both staff and customers. For 8 years, Marcus found peace in this work. He took pride in running efficient operations that served good food at fair prices to a diverse community. His military precision helped the restaurant maintain consistent quality while keeping costs low enough that working families could afford regular meals out. But Marcus's past was about to intersect with his present in the most dramatic way possible. August the 25th, 2023, Hurricane Harvey made landfall near Houston as a Category 4 storm. The city experienced unprecedented flooding, with some areas receiving over 50 inches of rain in 4 days. Thousands of residents were displaced from their homes, emergency shelters were overwhelmed, and normal food distribution systems completely broke down. Marcus watched the disaster unfold from his apartment, which was in a higher elevation area that avoided the worst flooding. Mama Rosa's restaurant was also spared, sitting on slightly elevated ground that kept it dry while many surrounding businesses were inundated. On the third day of the crisis, Marcus received a call from the Red Cross volunteer coordinator. "Mr. Washington, we know your restaurant is operational and we are desperate for help feeding evacuees. We have 3 emergency shelters with over 2,000 people total, but we are completely overwhelmed trying to coordinate meal service." Marcus immediately offered to help, but when he arrived at the primary shelter at the convention center, he found a chaotic situation that triggered all of his military logistics training. Volunteers were well-intentioned but uncoordinated. Food donations were arriving randomly without any system for inventory or distribution. Some areas had too much food while others had nothing. There was no system for tracking dietary restrictions, no coordination between meal times, and no planning for sustainable operations beyond the current day. Marcus observed the situation for 30 minutes, then approached the Red Cross coordinator. "I think I can help organize this more efficiently. We appreciate any help, Mr. Washington, but this is pretty complex logistics work." "I understand. I have experience with large-scale food service operations." Within an hour, Marcus had implemented systems that transformed the shelter's food operations. Drawing on his military logistics training, he established intake procedures for food donations, created inventory tracking systems, organized volunteer teams with clear roles and responsibilities, and developed meal planning that could feed 2,000 people 3 times per day for the foreseeable future. But Marcus was just getting started. His military experience had taught him to think beyond immediate needs and plan for extended operations. He began coordinating with other shelters to balance resources, established communication systems between feeding sites, and created backup plans for when volunteer numbers of food donations fluctuated. The Red Cross coordinator, Sarah Martinez, was amazed by the transformation. "Marcus, in 4 hours you've organized our feeding operation better than we managed in 3 days. Where did you learn this level of logistics coordination?" Marcus hesitated, then decided to share his background. 15 years Army logistics. I specialized in feeding troops in forward operating bases. Sarah's eyes widened. You are military logistics? No wonder this looks like a professional operation now. Word spread quickly through the emergency response community about the restaurant manager who had revolutionized shelter feeding operations. Other agencies began requesting Marcus's assistance with their own logistics challenges. Marcus found himself coordinating food distribution for 12 emergency shelters, 3 hospital evacuation sites, and several nursing homes that had lost power. He was essentially running a military-style logistics operation, but instead of supporting combat troops, he was feeding disaster survivors. The scope of the operation grew rapidly. Marcus established supply chains with local grocery stores, coordinated volunteer truck drivers for deliveries, set up communication networks between feeding sites, and developed meal planning systems that could adapt to changing numbers of evacuees. His military training proved invaluable in ways he hadn't expected. The ability to make decisions under pressure, coordinate multiple moving parts simultaneously, and maintain operations despite constantly changing conditions were exactly the skills needed for disaster response. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, an emergency management professor at Rice University who was studying the Houston response, observed Marcus's operation. What is created is essentially a military field logistics system adapted for civilian disaster relief. The level of organization and efficiency is remarkable. But Marcus was careful to adapt his military systems for civilian needs. Instead of military hierarchy, he emphasized collaborative decision-making. Instead of rigid protocols, he created flexible systems that could accommodate the diverse needs of evacuees. Instead of mission-focused efficiency, he prioritized dignity and choice for people who had lost everything. The most challenging aspect was the emotional weight. Marcus found himself reliving some of the stress from his military deployments, but this time the stakes felt different. Instead of supporting warriors who had chosen to be in harm's way, he was helping families, elderly people, and children who were simply victims of a natural disaster. The work was exhausting but deeply meaningful. Every meal served represented a family that wouldn't go hungry. Every efficient delivery meant resources could reach more people in need. Marcus was using his most intense military training for purely humanitarian purposes. 3 weeks into the operation, Marcus realized they had served over 150,000 meals across multiple sites. The systems he'd implemented were running so smoothly that they required minimal oversight, and evacuee feedback indicated high satisfaction with both food quality and service dignity. City officials took notice of the operation's success. Emergency Management Director Robert Chen approached Marcus about formalizing his role in the city's disaster response plans. Marcus, we've never seen logistics coordination at this level during a civilian emergency. Would you consider training our emergency response teams in these methods? Marcus was interested but cautious. I'd be happy to help, but I don't want this to become militarized. The approaches need to stay humanitarian, not tactical. Understood. We are talking about organizational efficiency, not military protocols. Over the next year, Marcus developed training programs for emergency responders throughout Texas. He taught civilian logistics coordination, volunteer management, and large-scale feeding operations to Red Cross chapters, emergency management agencies, and community organizations. His approach emphasized the human elements that had been missing from his military experience. While maintaining operational efficiency, Marcus's training focused on preserving dignity, accommodating individual needs, and creating systems that felt supportive rather than institutional. Marcus continued managing Mama Rosa's restaurant, but his role expanded to include emergency preparedness consulting. The restaurant became a designated emergency feeding site, and Marcus developed relationships with local suppliers and volunteer networks that could be activated during future disasters. The most important thing I learned in the military, Marcus would tell his trainees, is that logistics is really about taking care of people. The systems and efficiency matter, but they're only valuable if they serve human needs with dignity and compassion. Marcus's success led to opportunities he had never expected. FEMA offered him a position as a regional logistics coordinator. International humanitarian organizations reached out about disaster response training. Corporate emergency management companies wanted to hire him as a consultant, but Marcus preferred to stay rooted in his community. He had found the perfect balance, using his military skills for humanitarian purposes while maintaining the personal connections and peaceful environment that had drawn him to restaurant work. The contrast between his two roles often struck Marcus as profound. During normal times, he coordinated dinner service for families celebrating birthdays and anniversaries. During emergencies, he coordinated meal service for families who had lost their homes and possessions. Both roles involved feeding people, but the emotional context was completely different. Marcus realized that his work, whether routine or emergency, was fundamentally about nourishing communities and providing comfort through food and hospitality. 5 years after Hurricane Harvey, Marcus's emergency preparedness systems have been implemented throughout the Gulf Coast region. His training programs have prepared thousands of volunteers for disaster response, and his logistics methods have become standard practice for large-scale emergency feeding operations. Today, Marcus still arrives at Mama Rosa's every morning at 5 a.m. He still coordinates daily operations with the same precision that made him successful in military logistics. But now everyone in Houston's emergency management community knows that their neighborhood restaurant manager is also one of the region's most experienced disaster logistics coordinators. Regular customers at Mama Rosa's have no idea that the man who ensures their favorite dishes always available is the same person who revolutionized emergency feeding operations during the city's worst natural disaster. They just know that Marcus runs a great restaurant where the service is consistently excellent and the staff seems genuinely happy to be there. Marcus Washington found his peace not by abandoning his military training, but by transforming it into something that serves life rather than death, communities rather than combat operations, healing rather than warfare. He proved that the most technical military skills can be adapted for the most humanitarian purposes. His story shows that logistics, at its core, is about taking care of people, whether coordinating supply lines for troops in combat zones or organizing meal service for disaster survivors. The fundamental mission is the same: ensuring that people have what they need to survive and thrive. The skills that once supported military operations now support community resilience. The precision that once delivered ammunition now delivers hope. The coordination that once sustained warriors now sustains families in their most vulnerable moments. Marcus's transformation from military logistics coordinator to community caretaker represents the best kind of veteran transition, not abandoning military expertise, but redirecting it toward building stronger, more prepared, more caring communities. So I ask you, have you ever encountered someone whose organizational abilities in everyday situations revealed extraordinary training from their past? Someone who used specialized logistics skills to help during crisis moments? Share their story in the comments, because these quiet coordinators often make the difference between chaos and care when communities need it most. Thanks for watching. If this story resonated with you, subscribe to see more tales of extraordinary people who transform their most intense experiences into tools for community service. We'll see you in the next one.